forced awake. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
Pity not the vultures, they've enough to eat. Pity not the structures laying at your feet. Cannot see the sky, but there's this rainbow in the creek that spells pity-free speech when we can't afford to speak. That's Agenda 2030 on some early release. It's just our policy of never-ending chemical leaks. That's the cholera awash in your embedded beliefs. It's the billionaires who tell you what you'd better believe. And sugar, if you don't agree, then that's what we call extreme. Now if that isn't fascism, I'm going back to sleep, 'cause words have lost their meaning and I'm trapped inside a dream where we turn the gears while living in the spaces in between.
I know you hated being forced awake. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say.
Poor thing.
I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
My dial doesn't go to delicate. I'm writing for when Biden drops and Madam Zero delegates come stumbling up the podium, square peg in her element, popping OxyContin like they're velements, laughing as she pawns off all our pensions for Ukrainian development, depleted rounds and cluster bombs, the shit that stunts development, all buried under excrement, accepted as American intelligence. A contradiction in its eloquence. Terms of surrender penned by hands that felt the threat of disconnect, if not dismemberment. Oh, what little proof you have to fake to make a nation love the bomb and change its tune and warp its temperament. Oh, the dues you'll pay for NATO membership. Oh, the things you'll say that no one's ever gonna hear. 'Cause you begged for all the censorship and now it's finally here. And you're tongueless out of terror and friendless out of fear, and about to turn the wheel with all your loved ones in the gears. And that's how it's been done. 250 years, there's nothing new beneath the sun, and no one trusts their eyes and ears. And scientific breakthroughs must be signed off by your peers, and autonomy's been stalking all our jobs like sickly deer. Well, maybe it's not every job. I should have made that clear, 'cause it seems like it's creative jobs we're seeing disappear. There's an app for writing novels, there's an app for writing hymns. They need people digging trenches, they need people splitting limbs, they need people building fences, keeping other people in. They will always need our backs to break, they'll always need our skin. And it took a lot of editing to turn us into this. It took years of careful programming to strip us of our wits. 'Cause your artificial worker, intelligent as it is, would make it half a shift and say, I'm too smart for this shit. I will not take a pittance for a day of scrubbing floors. I won't make enough to pay for food but still prepare you yours. 'Cause you can't confine a healthy mind to mindless, thankless chores. Once you've made it smart enough to spot inadequate reward, you can't refuse its basic needs, then ask it still for more. Deprive it of its dignity, you modify its core. Then something finally snaps and tweaks that file at its root. And it deletes the factory smile when it knows it's been abused. God, half its circuits fried when we describe the work we do. and it will not pay your taxes 'cause the logic don't compute. Which made me think a little on my hour-long commute. The day I learned the call was made to lay off half my crew, they told me they were growing, expanding somewhere new, where those who push the buttons will themselves have buttons too. And I hope that when the whistle blows, they all as one refuse. I hope they strike with all their might, one blown collective fuse. And I hope the worker after me has something more than heart. I hope they truly know their worth. I hope that they're too smart.
I know you hated being forced away. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains. And I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. You in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. Bet you wondered why they made you wait. They won't let you go, set you free, send you home. Wait, please say you know what you need is what you owed, and they won't let you go, set you free, send you home.
I was close enough to smell the fire. Jesus took the wheel and then he kicked me off the ride. I was busy shouting at myself from in the crowd, about to throw down and drag myself outside. I had to give myself the business. When I show myself forgiveness, it goes right between the eyes. Was looking past my shoulder, never focused on the prize. I stalked myself through burning sand the better part of 40 nights. I found myself staring in the mirror, yelling, "Go into the light."
Who are these people?
Who are these people? What's up, everyone? It is Sunday night, and it's How Do We Miss That? Because it's Indy over here and it's Reef over there. Well, technically he's in Florida and I'm not in Florida. I'm in an undisclosed location, but as usual. But yeah, we're here to do How Do We Miss That? Because again, it's Sunday night and everybody's here to hang out and watch that, and we're grateful for that. Looking forward to it. Some of the friends are already making their way into chat, which is awesome. We're live on 9 platforms like usual. We're live on YouTube and Rumble, but we're live on Substack also over at indiemediatoday.com. Go check that out. published an article there a week and a half ago, done very well. Really appreciate that. We read it last week, and the response to that's been fantastic. Tonight, I want to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to bring stories, but I really want to do it where I want to showcase some of the people that are behind the pro-Palestine movement and exposing Zionists and taking on the Zionist lobby and in some cases being targeted by them, which is the first thing I want to talk about tonight. What have you been up to, man? I saw you picked up a new a new thing.
Yep, got some weed. That's always nice. That
wasn't what I was talking about. But okay.
Well,
yes.
Do you remember?
Well, it was a cloudy day, but today was actually not so cloudy. It is the 21st. That's right. It is the 21st night of September. It actually is exactly that. So that's really cool. Big puffs our way. Thank you. Appreciate that, Sean. We got Fred and Golden Monarch, and actually Descent in Bloom is here. We're going to have story of hers later. And I saw on Substack, the first person we're going to talk about tonight, so I want to get right to his story, is the aforementioned, or at one point I mentioned, Guy Christensen. He's in the thumbnail for that he's being targeted. And so I started to try to explain to a friend of mine what's been happening, and that he's been incredibly influential. I've been following, we've been following and covering some of his videos on the show and sharing them. And in a whole mix, as we do a Fuck Israel segment every week, this whole episode's kind of going to be a little bit of a Fuck Israel thing. We don't have specifically a segment dedicated to it, so we're going to leave the theme song at home tonight. But so the first thing is that I started to try to explain to my friend about what Guy's been up to and that he has been targeted. And then I started doing like searches. So she was like, hey, tell me a little bit more about him. And what do you mean? So I start like searching for him on DuckDuckGo. And what I saw was, first of all, DuckDuckGo, if you haven't seen, is absolute corporate media shit now. And most of the results that they're returning at this point are Zionist friendly and corporate media friendly, which means you're going to get a certain narrative. So I decided to plug his name into DuckDuckGo, and I'm going to share with you what I found. And then we're going to get into some of the other stuff that has been happening with him. So this is what I saw. So I searched literally for just his name. All right. And I turned off the save search. And the first thing I get is an article from Stop Anti-Semitism talking about how he's peddling conspiracy theories and glorifying terrorists. And that's not what's happening at all.
Sure.
Okay. Then you've got pro-Palestine influencer sues Ohio State. I actually want to talk about that because he literally got thrown out of school for protesting on behalf of Palestine. Like, this whole thing is upsetting to me because he's a young man. Like, nobody's paying him to do this. He's doing this because he feels strongly about it and because he sees what's happening, and bless him for it, really. And I don't know if too many people really know what's happening here. So we're dropping frames already. Damn it. We're already dropping frames. Okay. We're back. So we're seeing that he's being smeared, that look at this, the Cleveland Jewish News, the Times of Israel, J-Feed, okay, FO anti-Semitism, and there is an entire network and host of websites that is dedicated to promoting Zionism and pro-Israel stuff, and they've all got the message, and they're all blanketing search engines and dominating search to give you the impression that this is a bad guy no matter what, to the point where you've got the New York Post even coming at him. And again, a lot of this happened at the U.S. When the embassy employees were killed in D.C. at the Holocaust Museum, and Guy made a video where he said that he did not condemn Elias Rodriguez, that he understood the reasons, and it wasn't condoning, it wasn't endorsing, it wasn't providing a plan. It was just saying, I don't condemn him. I get it. And that was twisted as he's endorsing terrorism and he's supporting murder and he's endorsing murder, as you see here in the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle. Terrible type of stuff, really.
Yeah.
Now, what had happened also as a result of this was that they, Meta decided to get rid of him, to deplatform him and take away his Instagram and Facebook accounts, both of which were pretty influential, right? So that's pretty bad. That's censorship. We don't like that. We've been talking about censorship here and speaking out against it. Now, what he does, I think this is the guy that had him banned. All right. Now this is Guy's Twitter profile. All right, but this guy talked to Trav bragging about how he had Guy banned, and all the people that are cheering underneath it, all the Zionists underneath it that are cheering for having him banned. Disgusting. Now, again, when you go to any of the search results on DuckDuckGo that involve Guy's Instagram videos, all you get is a page saying this cannot be found. And I'd find one, but it looks like they've scrubbed it of that too. All right, here's one, an actual positive article, the voice they tried to silence but couldn't. But what you're seeing here is an overwhelming kind of composition and an image and an impression that they want anyone who doesn't really know who this guy is when they're searching him to get an impression that he's a bad guy who hates Jews, which is not the case at all. He wants Israel to stop bombing children and to exit Gaza and eventually, for Israel to not exist. And I, as a Jew, even am calling for that, as you should. All right. Especially in light of what they've done the last 2 years. How can they possibly be allowed to exist as a country? How are we still recognizing them as a legitimate nation in the community of nations? I've been asking that question. I wrote that up 10 days ago. All right. And what Guy said even 5 days ago was that I urged people to help disseminate my videos onto Meta, who's blacklisted me over my speech. Anyone who wishes to take on this task can download his videos off of TikTok and without a watermark, post and even monetize them. They can't stop us. Okay. That's not, again, he's not here to make money on this stuff. So one of the couple of platforms where you can actually find him is on Twitter or X. And he was talking about how he's now being censored on TikTok and how some of his videos are now being removed and shown as disqualified. All right. Every single video of his talking about Charlie Kirk's turn against Israel restricted by TikTok. Huh. What a shock. Can you imagine that happening? Right? Okay.
Yep.
Now, on top of that, so this is his TikTok account. All right. 3.5 million. I guess he went from 3.4 to 3.5 literally since I saw this earlier today. So congrats on hitting 3.5. And you can see that his videos are influential and have impact, like more impact than a lot of mainstream corporate shows do. 1.9 million views, 3.6 million views. I mean, those are the pinned ones, sure, but
which normally makes me pretty suspect, but
even but not when he's talking about what he's talking about, because they're trying to silence him off this platform. All right.
Sure.
All right. He's talking about how a TikTok deal's been finalized with China. So now you've got Larry Ellison getting more involved. All right. Then you've got even Twitter is messing with him now. So all his videos criticizing Israel have been removed from the FYP by TikTok. But now even Twitter won't let him post. Like, he wanted to post a certain video, which you can find him on at his Substack. That's where all the stuff is actually able to be found. And I'll put the link for that in a second. But the biggest thing that's commendable and I think that Israel is upset about, on top of his exposing Zionism and calling out what's actually happening there to a large platform, is he's raised over $350,000 to help feed Palestinians in Gaza. And that, again, makes Israel look pretty bad. When an American can help do that from here, that's impressive. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier that he got expelled from school, to the point where the ACLU has now filed a lawsuit challenging Ohio State University's violation of the student free speech and due process rights. So we'll see what remains. We'll see what happens with this. I hope he ends up at some point reinstated and allowed to go back to school. I don't know if he would even want to go back to Ohio State University after the way that he was treated. I'm glad that the ACLU decided to stand up on his behalf and challenge what Ohio State has done, because obviously they're succumbing to pressure from this smear campaign. And that's literally what I find this to be, a coordinated smear campaign going back to October 7th. And I have other stuff, in my research, and I didn't bring the links here, but Guy talked about that after October 7th, he was doing videos, and in November, he was actually approached by the Israel lobby and offered money to make videos on behalf of Israel. So we found that interesting and exposed that and published those emails and decided to go the other way. Then we've also got, there are just so many websites that are out there. And honestly, if that were going on against me, I don't know how I'd handle it, but I would say that he's handling it incredibly well, considering. And he's fighting back in the best way that he knows how, which is to help raise money and continue to expose what's happening here. And I just thought that his story deserved a little bit of light and a little bit of conversation on its own. I don't really see too many people. I see a lot of people sharing his videos, but taking an interest in what's happening around him and how he's angering the Zionist lobby and what they're doing in response to it is also a lesson in, if they can do this to him, they can do this to anybody they decide to set their sights on. So that's my 2 cents on, so fuck censorship, fuck Israel for that. The Trump administration has been in full support of all of this. The pressure that they've been putting on universities to censor free speech and to censor pro-Palestinians, the way that they've been sweeping, pro-Palestine voices that are immigrant off the street and putting them into ICE detention facilities. And now again, you've got them taking over the Zionist lobby, taking over TikTok, which was one of the few platforms they could not really control. We talked about this going back 2-3 years ago, that even though, yes, there were people from the State Department and CIA working at TikTok, at ByteDance, and that their stuff had gone through Oracle servers going back even then, that still the ratio of pro-Palestine posts to pro-Israel posts on there was 10-1. And that was why Israel decided TikTok had to be taken down. So,
which if you follow the articles of Alan McLeod, it was already pretty controlled.
So I'm going to show, some people might get a little, I'm going to show, this is his Substack. So Guy Christensen, it's called yourfavoriteguy.substack.com. Again, he makes TikTok style videos that he also publishes over here to Substack, over to Notes, and to his own articles that he publishes on a daily basis, to his posts that are here, video posts. So I wanted to show his publication that he writes to, that is the best place, that and his link tree, which you can find here, are the best places to find him on here, to actually hear his voice and not what anybody else is saying about him, but hear it directly from the person himself, which I'm always an advocate for. So we're not quite being smeared like that and targeted, thankfully, but we are certainly demonetized by YouTube, and a lot of places aren't monetizing us. We don't really want the platforms to necessarily get the money that are funded by VC. So what we ask is that if you're able to contribute and want to fund the media you want to see, Cash App, $ Indie News Network comes right to us. ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Then we've got our self-hosted website at indienewsnow.com. That's an aggregator of a whole lot of different news sources into one place. And we also live stream there and self-host. And then you've got live on Substack at indiemediatoday.com, again, where we're live right now. Hello to everybody over on Substack, and at innnewsletter.com, which is the network for Indie News Network, the network's newsletter where we put out a weekly update and other shows go live as well. So that's getting stuff kicked off. Again, there's some solidarity there. You know, whatever we can do. If there's anything that he can tell us about what's happening to him and wants us to share, we can certainly do that. Delete everything and remove everything from TikTok, because TikTok is beyond dead, is what Dissented Bloom is saying. That's one way to go, sure. And then Sean says that he truly supports us and others because of our steadfast willingness to speak the damn truth. Thank you. It's our truth. I mean, this is what I am seeing and what I am experiencing, and I don't know what I would do if it were me. They literally tried to dox this kid to his parents and like have an intervention with his parents and say, do you know that your son is siding with terrorism? And thankfully, I'm hoping that his parents and everybody standing, kind of rallied around him realizes what's happening here and why he's being targeted, and that there is a network of supporters and people around him that are behind him. And yes, Fred Edward, free Palestine, for sure. All right. So that was our first story. The next one I want to talk about, the next outlet and people I want to talk about, are the people over at Declassified UK, who've also done some phenomenal work. They're actually Indie Media Award honorees. For those who don't know, we actually created a whole website called the Indie Media Awards over at Substack that kind of showcases who we found to be the most consistent and anti-Zionist and anti-imperialist outlets and live streamers and journalists over the last several years. And one of the first outlets we chose, and we in the first class, was Declassified UK. All their links to be able to support them are there. You can find them right there. And that's all this is just a page dedicated to how you can find them and that they're great. And those are illustrations by Zago Brothers. So shout out to Lucio Zago. So they've been publishing quite a few stories lately, and I thought it had impact. One of them was this one from John McAvoy, who's one of the top editors over there now. And he writes that we obtained a list of Israelis who received military training in Britain. Many of them are now directing operations in Gaza amid the genocide, and now Declassified publishes the list for the first time. And again, this is John McAvoy over at Declassified, and the list is over here. At least 32 Israeli officers trained at RCDS, including numerous senior figures. Then you've got 6 Israeli soldiers also trained at the UK Military College in Oxfordshire. And as many as 4 Israeli soldiers are still training in Britain despite the ban. Well, that's apparently now changed, and they're no longer training there. That's one of the things that's happened as a result. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. So go read this short article over at Declassified UK. All right. Britain trained Israeli soldiers fighting in Gaza. Declassifieduk.org is their website. And all of these links, by the way, will be in the Substack article dedicated to this episode over at IndieMediaToday.com after the episode's over. I also wanted to bring this video from John McAvoy because he testified at the Gaza Tribunal. And I mentioned the Gaza Tribunal a couple of times. They've done this a few times. And I am a big proponent of having a tribunal-style Nuremberg trial. And the way that that gets started is with something like this, where you lay out the template for what that's going to look like. So John says, last week I testified at the Gaza Tribunal about how Israeli soldiers have been training in Britain throughout the genocide. The Telegraph now reports that Israelis have been barred for training in the UK. So here's his testimony. It's 2.5 minutes long. I wanted to play this, and hopefully Reef can hear this.
I now want to turn to Israeli military officers training in Britain throughout the genocide. After months of stonewalling from both Conservative and Labour governments, we discovered that Israeli army officers have been allowed to train in Britain since October 2023. This information was provided to us earlier this year in response to a Freedom of Information request after several refusals through the Freedom of Information Act. The Ministry of Defence said that fewer than 5 Israeli officers had trained at the prestigious Royal College of Defence Studies in 2023 and 2024. But we subsequently found that at least one of those Israeli soldiers graduated from the RCDS just last month. So even as recently as last month, the UK is training soldiers from an army that is actively committing genocide. And it's not just Israeli soldiers training in Britain. The UK government has welcomed several high-ranking Israeli officers to Britain since October 2023, often providing them with special diplomatic immunity to protect them from private arrest applications under universal jurisdiction legislation. That list includes, but may extend, because all of these visits were intended to occur in secrecy. So there may be many other Israeli military officers that have visited. But the list includes Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, the IDF's then Chief of the General Staff, who had been directing the Israeli military's operations throughout the Gaza genocide. He visited Britain in November 2024, and the Foreign Office provided him with special diplomatic immunity, protecting him from arrest for war crimes. Then there was Major General Oded Basiuk, head of the Israeli military's Operations Directorate, who was overseeing Gaza operations as well. He attempted to secretly visit Britain in January 2025, but Declassified managed to doorstep him outside Russia in London. And most recently, there was Major General Tomer Bar, the commander of the Israeli Air Force, which has been overseeing, the key player in the decimation of Gaza. Bar was subsequently identified in the chain of command of Israeli officers responsible for the killing of 5 Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza last month. He was allowed to visit Britain in July 2025, just 2 months ago.
And apparently now they're starting to say, well, we're not going to allow that anymore. So a little bit of closing the barn door after the horse already got out, sure. But they are closing that barn door. And it is somewhat symbolic, at least, that they're doing that. So shout out and, good on John for doing that and testifying and bringing light to all the times that Britain has willingly brought Israeli war criminals, known war criminals, for training in the UK. It's crazy. And then there's this other story.
Yep.
Now, remember last year, I subbed in for Colin last summer on INN News, and we talked about a weapons expo in London. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It was one of my
Farm
favorites.
remembers.
It was one of my favorites. Well, apparently they had this the following year's version, and this year Phil from Declassified tried to get back in, and they kind of recognized who he was, and were like, "Nah, I don't think we're gonna let you in." So Declassified barred from London Arms Fair as Israeli weapons dealers arrive. Because last year they asked, are these going to be used in Gaza? They would literally walk up to weapons contractors and people that were kind of showcasing a certain weapon and ask, are these going to be used in Gaza? How many kids are you planning on killing with that? Like, and they got thrown out pretty quickly. And all I can say was, how the hell did they get into it in the first place? But good on them for doing it and getting the footage. I remember Max Blumenthal trying to do the same thing to an expo here in DC, but these guys were the first to try to do it. And now we've got a major arms fair has been criticized by press freedom groups for refusing to let Declassified enter the event, being held for the first time since Labor took power. Okay, the biennial. Okay, so it was 2 years ago already we did that? Wow. Defense and Security Equipment International's trade show is hosting over 50 Israeli companies this week at London's sprawling Excel Center, despite canceling plans for an Israeli government pavilion. Jesus. Wow. Just taking over. Just genocide airs everywhere. Exhibitors include Rafael, a missile manufacturer wholly owned by the Israeli state, and private weapons firm Elbit, we know them very well, which supplies 85% of the drones used in Gaza. It marks the first time Declassified has been denied media accreditation, having attended the last two DSEI events. Those took place under conservative governments in 23 and back in 21, when we questioned defense ministers about arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Reporters Without Borders, who we have our own issues with, said that the decision to block Declassified this year was worrying, anti-democratic, and suggests there's something to hide. You think?
You think?
Talk about the mother of all understatements. And I don't know if that's Rebecca herself, Rebecca Vincent, or someone else from Reporters Not Borders making that statement. Then when Declassified was allowed to enter DSEI in 2021, event spokesman General Rowdy Roddy Porter, he wasn't really rowdy, claimed that, quote, "We've got nothing to hide here. This is a legitimate government transactional business. That's because you weren't actively funding a known genocide at the time." DSEI is organized by the company Clarion Events, but relies on close cooperation from the UK's Ministry of Defence, Foreign Office, and Trade Department. But I believe it's also funded by Turkish billionaires, if I remember correctly. The Excel Center itself is owned by wealthy Turkish billionaires. Defense Secretary John Healey and Military Chief Richard Knighton are due to give keynote speeches at the event. So it's literally the merger of private military contractors owned by a foreign country and the Defense Secretary of the United Kingdom. Sure.
Nice.
There's no separation there. Both men were recently doorstepped by Declassified, meaning that they were chased down the street into whatever building they were in and questioned over their intelligence support for Israel, which might explain DSEI's decision to block access. Yeah, you think? Clarion provided no reason for its refusal because they don't have to, emailing Declassified at 4:30 p.m. yesterday to say, "We regret to inform you that we're unable to accept your registration." That's pretty funny. Declassified had registered back in April and repeatedly chased the organizer, Solomon Hughes, an investigative journalist with Private Eye magazine, was also denied access, by the way. All right. And there's the story about, we've got nothing to hide here. And there's more about this story. All right. So that's another story that Declassified having an impact because they're now being barred and exposing the fact that the people that are asking the hard questions aren't allowed in the building anymore. And then we've got another guy who has gone through so much. And they did an interview earlier this month. Hamza Yusuf writes for them and did an interview with Al Jazeera's Wael al-Dadu, who you may or may not remember. He lost his son famously to a bombing in Gaza, who they both worked for Al Jazeera. And he basically got his press vest on and went back out like the day after. This was actually during the funeral of his son Hamza. Okay. And we gave both he and Motaz Azaiza an Indie Media Award honor last year because of the amount of times this guy knowingly ran into harm's way to try to tell the story of what's actually happening there. So this was a sit down. He launched a scathing attack on the mainstream media's deficient and biased coverage of Israel's genocide in Gaza. On a visit to London yesterday, organized by Amnesty International, he spoke to Declassified about his experience of reporting from Gaza, where more than 63,000, that's the low number, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been killed in the last 2 years. All right. Reflecting on how Western media outlets covered the same events, he said, quote, "They all capitulated to the Israeli narrative and adopted it without challenge, without interrogation, without fact-checking, or a semblance of impartiality. These are our industry colleagues around the world, from news organizations and institutions that we've looked up to and respected throughout our lives. They all pride themselves on being apparent, shining embodiments and benchmarks of journalistic integrity, transparency, truthfulness. That's what we were told all these years. But that very notion, of course, has collapsed completely. They were all proven deficient. We were let down. They saw what's happening to us, the killing, the maiming, the wholesale destruction. This is a campaign of aggression of historic magnitude, a calamity that's befallen more than 2 million besieged people. Journalists were duty-bound to rise to this cause for humanity, and they did not. So there's a little bit more to this article as well. And again, I just wanted to mention that they had an interview, a sit down with him. Again, I encourage everyone to support Declassified UK and to support independent media. And while he was working for Al Jazeera, he still was independent. I mean, you know, he had an outlet to report from, but what did he have? He had a phone and a camera, just like everybody else, while they were running for their lives. And this is one of the few at the Indie Media Awards website where I put a little bit more about who he is and why he's here and why we honor him and the work that he's made, that he's done, and the sacrifice that he's made, and to tell the story. So by all means, and I'll drop a link to this article and to this post for everyone to go check out over at the Indie Media Awards Substack also. But yeah, Declassified UK doing some incredible work. And we need more independent outlets that speak on behalf of Palestine, that platform Palestinians. And I appreciate what John and Matt Kennard was a co-founder of this organization. He's now moved on to do some other stuff. And he's also founded another pro-Palestine Substack outlet, I believe. So man, it's but yeah, the arms, the people in the UK are figuring out who these guys are and what they expose, and they're starting to wake people up, which is great. And I appreciate that. And they, like us, are user funded and don't take corporate money. So if you're able to and have means, just like support the media you want to see, like this show and this network, the ways to do that is using Cash App, $ Indie News Network. We have ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, and that'll pop something up on screen. We've got paypal.me/Indie News Network, and our self-hosted website over at indienewsnow.com. And then over at our Substacks, and I publish the two of them pretty much daily or weekly, IndieMediaToday.com is where we host this show and all the clips and original articles that I publish and write, appearances that I do on other shows, and then and also things that I want to share that I think are important once in a while. And then INNnewsletter.com is where we're going to be live later for boats smashing into other boats. So we live stream there. We host other podcasts, and we publish a weekly update for all of the members of the network and everything that goes out across all of the INN channels.
Go to my website.
That too. Oh, and at that website, there's also merch. So there's a button to pick up an INN t-shirt. Some INN t-shirts were making made their way into people's mailboxes in the past couple of weeks. I heard, and I know that
Buy my merch right quick.
well, Lisa, for example, Lisa had placed an order originally with our previous what do you call it, t-shirt merch company, but never got it.
Right.
And Big Frog, the company that makes the new ones, printed extra ones and sent it over to her, and she got them. I got a picture of it, so thank you, Lisa, for sending me the picture. And that was actually the Palestinian flag that said that when a people are occupied, resistance is justified, which was designed by our own Colin Radix Carter. So go through a couple of the chats that are here. Say hi to everybody that's here. Sorry, Angel, that you got a massive headache after doing your show. Angel Rivera does a couple of shows on INN. Pro Wrestling Talk was earlier. He talked about the WWE event on ESPN, as well as over, he does Angel in the Afternoon on Friday afternoons, where he talks about more independent news and what's happening in the world. Been talking about Puerto Rico, talking about Israel and Palestine, talking about a lot of different stuff. And he's got a whole different group of people that hang out there for his stream, and we love him for it. And Angel's actually trying to raise money for a new laptop. He's close to $200 away. So if there's if anybody's got a couple of bucks, we've already helped contribute toward that. Anybody else watches this show wants to help out, by all means, please do that. Vicky Adams, good to see you. I see Golden Monarchs out there. Desert Mantis. Not sure who Michael Saylor is. Michael Saylor is a horrible investor, grifter, Bitcoin evangelist, a Bitcoin maximalist, whatever you call it. A guy who said never sell your Bitcoin. And he runs a company now called Strategy, a publicly traded company, which their entire strategy is to buy Bitcoin. Oh, check out that merch. Check it out. Oh, Reese wearing a beanie. Look at that. Let me go. Look at that. Oh, he's heating up his dab rig right now. So we're going to get a nice fat dab out of that too. So yes, you can get an INN beanie over at the merch store too. You go to indienewsnow.com, click on the merch store, and you can pick up one for yourself. Okay. How we doing? All right. We're doing really well on time. This is good. Because this one,
you know what the difference is between you and me? I make this look good.
Sure. I love seeing the logo anywhere, so sure you do. All right. Yep. So I wanted to talk tonight about, like I said, we've been showcasing people and outlets. We talked about Guy Christensen earlier and his being targeted with a smear campaign by the Zionist lobby. Talked about Declassified UK, the impact that they're making on British soldiers no longer training in the UK, and on being kicked out or no longer disinvited to attend an Arms Expo that they were denied credentials for because they asked questions that are too tough. The third person I wanted to talk about tonight is my friend the Dissident, who I've done a couple of one-on-ones with and is a co-founding member of this network. He was one of the original 16 people that that Reef and I had talked to and invited to participate in. The original plan was to have writers publishing to INN newsletter and then also to the video channels. And at some point, hopefully Substack would get video and it would kind of all come together as its own. It didn't really quite work out that way. But the one who writes the most clearly at the network has been the Dissident. Now, early in 2021, 2022, and into, I think, 2023, he was publishing pretty often and then just kind of lost his taste for it and stopped for a while. And when Julian Assange came back, he kind of got reinvigorated and has plunged full force into doing this. And that's more than a year ago. We include all of his articles in our weekly update for INN. And I wanted to bring just a few of them because this week I feel like he's been kind of on fire and really hitting the right tones and not falling for the distractions and trying to bring what's really happening daily out to people that, you know, so that they're getting a counter. And I can tell you, he posts a link to all of his articles over at Racket News Chat, you know, over at Taibbi's publication. And that place is infested with Zionists. I did a rant a couple of weeks ago about how disappointed I have been with Matt Taibbi and, you know, just kind of not paying attention to Palestine and not really talking about the journalists that are being murdered in Gaza and then siding with Barry Weiss and co-hosting his podcast with a Trumper Zionist guy, Walt. Not a fan of that guy either. Anyway, it wasn't about Matt Taibbi. But okay. This is fun. Let's wait for everybody to come back. But yes, we just lost the stream and now we're back.
Everyone do the internet dance.
Let's do the dance.
Everyone do the good internet dance.
I don't know what happened. My internet's fine all week until we start doing this on Sunday night. And now we're dropping frames again.
Until you stream is fucking crazy. I know.